Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. And welcome to a very special edition of the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen. Once again, here for another fine episode of the Juice Box. And this is a special one. I currently, as of this airing, I am not where I normally would record. Therefore, I decided to do a little Ask Juice episode. I feel like it'll probably come in around a half hour or so, a little less than my normal episodes do. But that's probably better for everybody involved. I got 5 or 6 pretty interesting questions that I'm going to dive a little deep into, which I am looking forward to discussing opinions and such. But as always, on Twitter, Juicy Steen, Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram. You can also find this podcast on Podbean, juicysteen.podbean.com, Google Podcasts, and on iTunes. For Apple Podcasts, that'd be great if you could rate and review it on iTunes, 5 stars or 5 straws. You know the deal. Let's get into some Ask Juice. So, I pose these questions as I normally do to some of my friends out in the wrestling world who love watching wrestling. Wrestling's great. Shout out to the Cheap Heat podcast for that little inside tip. But yeah, wrestling is great. We love wrestling. So these are kind of, I hesitate to say long form, but they are definitely thinkers that I will be putting some thought into. Some aren't going to be wrestling related. I believe actually only one is not wrestling related, but we'll get to that. Let's begin with some current stuff for Ask Juice. This one says, with all of the different pathways you could take involving Finn Balor to win the world title, Damian Priest potentially cashing in at any time, Rhea trying to maintain her own dominance in the women's division as a champion herself, and Dom trying to escape from not only the shadow of Rey, but now as a champion of his own right in NXT as the North American champion. Can you see the Judgment Day storyline evolving to the complexities and layers like the Bloodline has? If you heard me relay this question and read it out loud, I would almost wager that it's already starting to become complex. The fact that you had at SummerSlam Finn Balor, who, yes, you know, the redemption of 7 years since having the match with Seth at SummerSlam, where he famously got injured, unfortunately, but he still won the Universal title for the first time. That title was able to be obtained. Outside of that, you know, if he were to win that title, you also had the outside chance of Judgment Day cohort Damian Priest potentially getting involved, and then, you know, himself potentially cashing in on Finn and becoming the champion. I predicted that before SummerSlam. I so stupidly predicted Finn Balor not only winning the world title, but Damian Priest immediately cashing in after that. I say stupid, but it was more of just ambitious. Seems like they want to have Seth hold it a little longer. I assume he'll go through Nakamura at Payback, which is in Pittsburgh, by the way, which those seats are selling out. It's pretty close to a sellout, and not one match has been announced. So that's pretty cool to see. And of course, if anything happens before this episode has aired that I could not cover because I recorded this one a little early, then be that as it may, and we will discuss further next week's show. As we are, you know, next week's show, we're going to be previewing All In from Wembley Stadium, and then seeing what else has been happening in the world of WWE as well as we do near closer to Payback. And then the following week, I did tease an interesting potential Payback PLE prediction show. So we'll see what comes to fruition once we get to those weeks, but 1 week at a time here on the Juice Box. But yeah, I was a little sidebar, but yeah, I kind of see this Judgment Day storyline it's already becoming complex. It's already it's the Raw equivalent to the Bloodline, it's tough, everything's going to be compared to the Bloodline now that it's coming up on 3 years for the Bloodline. But as I say that, that doesn't mean that every faction has to have the longevity, nuance, complexities, as you said, of the Bloodline. But it's nice to see the certain intricacies, I guess, and nuances to the characters as they progress. Maybe not to the extent of the Bloodline, but it's been enjoyable watching them start with Edge, kick Edge out, and really become, for lack of a better term, the new blood of WWE. Finn's been around for quite a long time now, but still, I would say that Rhea, pretty new, comparatively speaking. Damian Priest is pretty new. Dom Mysterio has only been, main roster wrestling for 3-4 years now, and now he's getting to do the NXT gig and have a run there, boosting their ratings, as a matter of fact. So good looks for Dirty Dom. But I do think that there's some certain complexities with the Bloodline that are happening. I just don't necessarily think it's imperative that they have to be like the Bloodline for it to be successful. I think it's already been successful, and I think that they'll continue to be successful as long as they have a certain plan. Now, when Priest cashes in, it depends on who that is against and who helps him get there. Stuff like that is going to really impact how long, because that's the thing. How long are these groups going to last? If the Bloodline continues throughout, like they've been steady, but they added, Solo Sikoa, they added Sami Zayn, they got rid of Sami Zayn. Now it seems like they were going to get rid of Roman, or the whole Bloodline was Bloodline Civil War, but now Jimmy turned on Jay. So Jay, it's not that Jay's out of the Bloodline almost. It's like they're all, because the Bloodline's family. Paul Heyman is just a wise man, but the Bloodline is still all family, so it's not as if they can split up traditionally. So, I don't know, a lot of interesting things to think about in regards to the Bloodline and the Judgment Day, but I love that we are still here in 2023 with two groups of, of talent, faction-wise, in the Bloodline and in the Judgment Day, that have some longevity, that are interesting and intriguing storylines that people can gravitate towards, and at the same time also have, Priest is the Money in the Bank. Finn was going for the world title. Rhea's the world champ. Dom is North American champ. Like, they're all doing their own thing, but they're still solidified as a whole, which I really do like, because the Usos were tag champs. Solo was an enforcer. Roman's the main guy. He's the champ. So I do enjoy both. And I'm enjoying what they are. So I definitely can see the Judgment Day continuing to evolve. I just don't really know what that entails, so we'll see. We will most definitely see. So, great question. Man. Let's get into another current question, only because it kind of deals with the Bloodline. If WWE cannot come up and execute an excellent climax for the Bloodline story / Roman's title reign, will it negatively affect the company in terms of viewers, revenue, or overall fandom? In short, no. But like I just said, I think it's so important for the Bloodline storyline, Roman's title reign, to end on an important note, I really think that it has to have a definitive ending, at least the title reign, because we've had the Bloodline Civil War, we've had, this and infighting, and we're going to have Jimmy and Jay wrestle potentially at WrestleMania, if not Payback. We've got Solo still got some work, I think, before, I think Solo could go for a title. There's so many more avenues that they could tackle before they end it all, right? But as stated last week, on last week's episode, talking about Cody in finishing the story, could Gunther be the one to not finish the story, but finish Roman's reign? Pun intended. I just think I think it's imperative that the story gets finished correctly. I think WrestleMania 40 is going to be the move. I think Cody defeating Roman after not look, Cody went away after not being much in WWE after so long. He had been loyal. He goes away on the independent scene, kills it. He even kind of, is really a part of creating AEW, making it a big deal in the pro wrestling space, and then coming back to WWE, such a high level, WrestleMania, goes against Seth Rollins, defeats Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, has 3 great matches with Seth Rollins, including that incredibly memorable Hell in a Cell match where his pec was torn. So stuff like that, I feel, really helped elevate Cody to be more believable to defeat Roman. Even so, after that injury, Cody had to go and win the Rumble and still didn't finish the story. So after that, you get Brock, and now he's finally concluded with Brock, and Brock gave him the endorsement. He gave him the okay. He shook his hand, he hugged him, he raised his hand in victory. So to me, Cody's well on his way now. He's coming close to, and this is not me, this is the perception of how WWE is viewing it. Cody is close to, quote, earning his chance at Roman again. I don't know if he necessarily has to win the Royal Rumble again, and I really hope he doesn't. I hope someone wins the Royal Rumble and goes after whoever the World Heavyweight Champion is. That would be really cool. Like, if it's Seth still and Gunther wins, give me Gunther and Seth at Mania. Give me Gunther winning the Rumble and going up the world title if you have Cody trying to finish the story. I think it's really important that if it's Cody, the next feud kind of gets him through. You have to have him to where there's something good at Survivor Series. I would love a Cody versus Roman team Survivor Series 5-on-5 match. I don't think they're going to do War Games again, at least. It doesn't look like it. But once you get to Rumble time, it's going to be fascinating to see who, the Final Four. I've said all along, Grayson Waller, LA Knight, Gunther. I don't even know who I said the fourth guy was, to be honest with you. I might have said Randy Orton. I think Randy Orton's going to come back, so that's what I picked. But I think those guys are your lead guys. I don't think you need Cody to win the Rumble to get back to the title picture, at least against Roman. I think you have enough of, look, I beat Brock 2 out of 3. Like, Roman had history with Brock. If Cody can continue to do stuff like this and go in a little bit of a run, then it'll be easy to have, it'll be easy to have, like, believable to have Cody get to a point if he just kind of suggests. He doesn't have to demand a title, but if he kind of pushes the issue, he's like, look, Roman, you've beaten everybody, but you barely beat me. Look what it took to beat me. And I think it's very doable, but at the end of the day, I said no initially to is it going to negatively affect it? No, but I just think it's so important that when it happens, it has to be the biggest moment possible. It has to be at WrestleMania. And for right now, I do think it has to be Cody. I know I probably said it had to be Cody at 39, but we are at a point now where it would make sense. I think if it doesn't make sense right now, but I think that if they continue this path, they can definitely make it make sense by Mania 40. So we'll see. We got a long road before we even sniff the road to WrestleMania. We are in August right now, and we've got Payback, Fastlane, Survivor Series. Unsure if they'll do a December pay-per-view or PLE, but then you go right into Rumble and you're there. So we'll see. But it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Because as much as this has been great, and I've loved this renaissance of having a long title reign and this and that, and it's been great, I am more fascinated and intrigued with what are they going to do to conclude it, and then how do they take that conclusion and turn it into the next storyline. Like, what's going to be the next thing? Is Roman going to still be around after he's not champion anymore? So stuff like that fascinates me because it's been so built up. It's like when it's over, it's like, well, we're done. Roman's going to stop wrestling. Like it's so high level that unless they come up with something great to follow through, I can't really foresee something as good as what's happening now. So looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. So we will see. But great question again. I don't think the viewership is going to decline if it doesn't go well. I think, again, your fans like me are going to be tuning in regardless to see what happens after it. And unless Roman's completely ripped off of TV, I don't see why viewership would go down. He's still an intriguing character. Unless he's off TV completely, maybe it diminishes a little bit. But I think they have talent. I think they got a lot of young talent too that is pretty well capable. They're chomping at the bit to finally get over. Now we got Seth Rollins as World Heavyweight Champion. Once the Undisputed Universal Championship is freed up from Roman and we got two separate champions and none of them are Roman Reigns and the Bloodline, I think you got a lot of opportunities to get more people over, get new people over, get better ratings with different people. I think it's very doable. And I think the revenue and fandom is going to always be there. It's WWE. It's Coke. It's Pepsi. It's brand name. It's WWE is wrestling. People think of wrestling, they think of WWE. People talk about MMA, they think UFC. It's a brand. It's going to be the stalwart until it's not. And right now, I don't think it's going to be not the main brand for a long, long time. So, fascinating discussion. Can't wait to see how it turns out. But great question again. Let's go into this next one. We're going to do one fun little question. Then we're going to talk about some Hall of Fame stuff, which will bleed into another one. This is a fun one. I'm just going to kind of quickly go over these guys. But the question was posed, who is the best, or I'm going to take it a different way. Who are my favorite jobbers, but I'm also throwing in favorite mid-card talent in the history of pro wrestling ever. And I'm just going to list some guys. I might name what they did, if they did anything. Let's go for WCW first. I was a WCW guy. Our family watched Nitro and taped Raw. I'm a huge WCW fan through and through. My first wrestling show was the June 10th, 96 Nitro, where Kevin Nash showed up and said, we ain't here to play, that whole thing. So, WCW through and through. And some of the guys that I really enjoyed watching, even especially going back and watching it, are those mid-card guys that just something about them is intriguing. We got Van Hammer, who is kind of like a rocker, like a rock star character, obviously a playoff Van Halen, and then, people having a hammer, like your guitar and stuff like that. I don't know. It was an interesting character in early to late 91, and he lasted, I believe, until 93, 94. But he came back and was wrestling for WCW, I believe, in 98, 99 as well. He stuck around for quite a long time. Well, first of all, he's shredded, and that's not a guitar pun, but it just happened to be that way. He's a pretty jacked dude. Now, my personal favorite Van Hammer moment, there's two. I'm going to find the one right now. Let's see, because I want to get the date correct on this. But there's two matches that when I think of Van Hammer, this is what I think of. So the first would be 91. Where is it at here? Yep. Clash of the Champions 17. I remember him having a match against Cactus Jack, which I always thought was a fun little match. It was a VHS tape that had been recorded, I don't know, from my dad or somebody. And I watched this thing over and over and over and over again. It's November 17th, or November 19th, 1991. It's a fun show. Luger and Rick Steiner in the main event. Sting, Rick Rude with a great storyline throughout the whole show. Bobby Eaton and Firebreaker Chip. Oh, man. But yes, the other match I remember is Slamboree 93, where he comes out. He looks absolutely yoked to the gills, but he's going to face a special opponent, and it's the returning Sid Vicious, who makes quick work of him. And it was fantastic. For a guy that looks so jacked, he got absolutely handled by Sid Vicious. So that was Van Hammer. He was one of those guys that I enjoyed watching. Another one which you just can't, I don't know, you can't explain. I mean, I can explain it, but I just don't understand it. Arachnaman. Not Spider-Man. Arachnaman. Now, Arachnaman, I do believe, was Brad Armstrong under a mask, a purple Spider-Man-ish character. I don't know. He was in Battle Bowl. I love the 91 era. So those are the guys I kind of gravitate towards. Definitely more on the jobber side than mid-card side. But he was a great wrestler without the mask or with it, so I kind of enjoyed it. La Parka was always a fun favorite for me growing up. He was the chairman of WCW. Really enjoyed his antics, his dancing antics and such. We had Disco Inferno, who can be polarizing, and he's pretty polarizing these days, but I thought his gimmick was pretty damn good. Similar to Johnny B. Bad, where it's like, you're saddled with this gimmick. Good luck. Some guys would run away and be like, you know what? I'm not being Johnny B. Bad. I'm not going to be this crazy, over-the-top, flamboyant character who shoots a confetti blaster. That's so lame, but he killed it and was great at it. Disco Inferno, same type of deal. Here, be a disco character who's really over the top and annoying. Saturday Night Fever, but it's the 90s, it's 20 years later. He not only embraced it, but he was a pretty good worker. He had a solid match with Dean Malenko at Bash at the Beach 96. And I liked his work. I thought he was pretty over, whether you liked him or hated him. I think he was pretty much over across the board. So Disco Inferno is one. And then Max Payne, who teamed up with Cactus Jack a few times in late 93, early 94. Famously, their Spring Stampede Chicago Street Fight against the Nasty Boys is a favorite match of mine between Max Payne, Cactus Jack, and those guys. So Max Payne's another one. Let's go to the WWF. I'm going to pretty much name these quicker. Maybe a quick tidbit here or there. Mantar, who unfortunately passed away recently. Quang, Savio Vega's first foray, I believe, in WWF as a martial arts, Mortal Kombat-ish character. Barry Horowitz, who got a huge win over Skip, Chris Candido, in 95. Salvatore Sincere, who I think was more of a 96 guy. I remember watching him a lot on like the early 96 Raws. Nothing. He was just a random. I really don't have anything else other than to say he was really just a random guy. And also Barry Horowitz, that win against Skip was at SummerSlam 95 in Pittsburgh's first pay-per-view, as they were called before they were PLEs. But yeah, Salvatore Sincere was a random guy on Raw. Barry Horowitz, like I said, Aldo Montoya, who then became just incredible later on in his career. We also have Colin Delaney and Mario Mancini, Mario Mancini was the first opponent for The Undertaker that aired after his debut in Survivor Series 90. It was taped beforehand, so this is when he was Kane The Undertaker, which is fascinating because then Kane was actually his brother after the fact. So, love that. Those are my favorite jobbers / mid-card guys. Let's continue with, let's see here. Let's do this. Let's get into it. I'm going to try to make this quick because it could go long. We're already almost at 30 minutes. I don't want to really bore anybody here, but let's do the Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame's most deserving / undeserving. I'm not going to go into the deserving part because I think this whole thing is really subjective. And I'm not going to say undeserving either, again, because it's so subjective. It's going to be more of a question of like, there's so many more people that could be in, like a Bam Bam Bigelow, like a Lex Luger. And some of these guys that are in there now, I don't know why they're there. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to just question. I'm going to go through the questionable Hall of Famers through the years. Let's see. Let's start with 2011. I'm really not seeing too much negative, and I'm not going to do the celebrity wing either. I think they all have their place. Now, people will say the Bushwhackers are a questionable one, but they were very over. I think they earned that. Let's see. Who else is in here that I don't know? Some would say, Tori Wilson or Brutus Beefcake. I don't know. Some of them I do buy. I think some of them deserve it for sure. Great Khali is a questionable one to me, at least right now. I think they all have their place. It's tough. I think this type of question is more suited for potentially the Triple Threat Theater, which will happen at some point in the future. We will do the third installment of that great series with myself, Josh Cross, and Donnie. So this might be more of a question in that realm, but some of the ones that I see off the top of my head, but I could, again, rattle off some more that should be in that aren't. Luger and Bam Bam Bigelow, like I said. But I also wanted to transition to this following question. Next year, Philly is the host of WrestleMania. So who's not in the Hall of Fame right now could or should be in the Hall of Fame next year from ECW? Now, Rob Van Dam's already in. I don't know if Sabu would get in because he was just on AEW TV recently. Doubt that he would go in. So I have two. Now, Paul Heyman eventually will go in. He could easily be the guy that goes in this year. But I think he'd go in when he's retired. I don't think he's ready to go in yet. Although it's Philly, so they might just force it. But if I had to pick, I got two. They only have to pick one, but I got two. We got Sandman, who legendary ECW figure. He goes to WCW and he was Hack. But WWE, he was Sandman. There's definitely some room for a Sandman induction. I think he earned it as an ECW guy, and I think it'd be a hell of an entrance. Oh my gosh, how could you imagine if they got and licensed Enter Sandman for one last Sandman entrance? The other guy that I think probably more likely, because he's still kind of in the realm of wrestling pretty actively these days, is Tommy Dreamer. Now, I know he's been working on in Impact, and he's on Busted Open and stuff. So, again, it could be a conflict of interest, but they've worked with Impact before. But Tommy Dreamer's an ECW legend. He's pretty much the heart and soul of ECW for the entirety of it. Outside of Joey Styles, I would like to see Joey Styles potentially get into the Hall of Fame. I know that's maybe an unpopular opinion, but I'd like to see Joey Styles get into the Hall of Fame. as a broadcaster. I think he's a damn good broadcaster, and got a Raw deal, pun intended, when he did Raw, and got skipped over for certain shows. And I know he worked on .com. I don't know if he's still working on .com, but yeah. Two more quick questions. The Mount Rushmore of metalcore. Josh Cross wanted to get this one in. I'm going to say my 4 that I personally would pick as my Mount Rushmore of metalcore. I love that rhyme scheme as well. But I'm also going to go and say some of the honorable mentions. But my Mount Rushmore of metalcore would be Bring Me the Horizon, Parkway Drive, Killswitch Engage, and my personal favorites. And it's not because they're my favorite, but they've been around since 2005, 2006, 17, almost 18 years now. And that would be one band that has stood the test of time to me. And they've evolved, and I know Bring Me the Horizon has evolved as well, but this band certainly has as well. I don't want to say this, but I gotta. My 4th on the Rushmore is The Devil Wears Prada. I butchered that rhyme scheme that they used to do on their early shows. They would say, I don't want to say this, but I gotta. We are The Devil Wears Prada. But Prada, Bring Me the Horizon, Parkway Drive, and Killswitch Engage are my Mount Rushmore of metalcore. But I think it's tough to pick. There's a lot of good bands that have stood the test of time, and their albums from the early 2000s, mid 2000s still hold up. I'm going to name some of them now. Asking Alexandria, Of Mice and Men, August Burns Red, Under Oath, As They Lay Dying, and then maybe my favorite that didn't make the Mount Rushmore, that really got me really into heavy music, was Atreyu. Atreyu really got me into heavy rock music back in the early 2000s. So The Curse, Bleeding Mascara is like one of my favorite songs. It's so like crazy and heavy, and I think it kind of launched me into that realm of metalcore music. So, and then Devil Wears Prada solidified that, and they've been my favorite band for probably the better part of 15 years. So, let's go one more question. It's kind of a long form question, but I have a quick answer. So we'll make it the closer here. If you could have signed any WWE superstar from the Attitude Era to WCW that didn't make the jump, who would it be and why? And they say to feel free to go into a booking scenario if I'd like to have more detail. I'll kind of make it short and sweet, but also have a booking thing in there. And it's not because it's a coincidence, but Bret Hart went to WCW from WWF, didn't really work out. But someone who I thought could have definitely gone from WWF to WCW that would have thrived, not because they were just a great wrestler, great charisma, great performer, but their friends were there, and they made references back and forth to each other even when they weren't on the same shows. And I'm talking about Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels would have not only been used correctly, I think, in WCW, because, I don't know, I think the timing would have been better. It was rumored that 96, 97, even 98, Shawn Michaels could have been in WCW, especially once Nash and Hall went over there. And I think Nash and Hall could have courted Shawn Michaels to go. And if he did go, I think he could have easily fit into the NWO and could have made the NWO even bigger than what it was. Now, I know potentially could have had problems with Hogan being involved, because that's so many like egos, and I know wrestling's full of egos, but still, I would have loved to have seen Shawn Michaels in the NWO. But I mean, he also could have turned babyface and could have helped out a Sting. I mean, God, they did the Ultimate Warrior, Ahmed Johnson, Shawn Michaels thing, short-lived, and they never even got the 6-man tag that they wanted at In Your House, International Incident. But imagine if Shawn Michaels goes to WCW, helps Sting. I don't know. There's so many cool ideas that could have been there. But how many times did they flash a Too Sweet sign? I love that stuff. And I think it would have been really cool to see Shawn Michaels traverse over there. And I think he would have thrived in the NWO, the real NWO, not the NWO of 2002 that he joined. Ugh, forget that. But I just think it would have been really cool. Shawn Michaels had the attitude, pun intended, but he has so much charisma and an edge to him that I think could have really shined in the realism storylines and storytelling of the NWO. So Shawn Michaels in the NWO would have been incredible, and then Bret Hart probably would have stayed throughout the end of 97 for sure, and would have been, the main guy in 98. So imagine a Bret Hart, Steve Austin Attitude Era feud, a Mr. McMahon fully fleshed out versus Bret Hart feud. So many avenues they could have taken. Bret Hart versus Triple H, Bret Hart versus The Rock. You could have had so many incredible bouts if you swapped Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels instead. But that's what happened in my fantasy land. It didn't happen in real life, and WCW is no longer here, unfortunately. So that's just how it is. But the Juice Box is here, and it's here every week. It's been here every week since early January, and we are not stopping. That's why I wanted to get this Ask Juice episode recorded and get it out there to the masses so we can have an episode every single week and stay on top of things. And I think I mentioned it last week. The thing with podcasts, when I first wanted to do this, I really wanted to do this on my own. I'm the only one responsible. I can really rely on myself. I don't have to rely on anybody. I can bring people on, and it's great. And I love talking to Josh Eisenberg, Josh Cross, Donnie. We could have more people on in the future. And it's great to bounce off them. That's what I did on Chair Shot Reality. It's what I did with my friend Matt all those years on YouTube and stuff, and Blog Talk Radio and what have you. I still do some Twitter Spaces and such, bouncing off of people. But being able to come on here and do this on my own is pretty cool. But I wanted to be able to sustain that, and I know if I do it on my own, I have to own up to my responsibility of putting a show out every week. So I want to make sure I got this episode out to you guys on time, Fridays, 9 a.m. Eastern, like I always do. So appreciate you guys listening to last week's episode, this week's episode, and every other episode if you do. Can't wait for next week. We got All In. The following week, we got predictions for the PLE Payback in Pittsburgh. How many P's can we fit? Who knows who will be on that prediction show for Pittsburgh's Payback PLE prediction show. Who knows? But can't wait for All In. Can't wait for Payback. Can't wait for All Out. This has been Ask Juice. Hashtag Ask Juice. Anytime you want to ask a question, throw it on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Juicy Steen. Hashtag Ask Juice. You can go to Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram. Chat with me there. JuicySteen.podbean.com, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. 5 stars, 5 straws on iTunes. If possible, rate and review the Juice Box. But as always, I'm Juice Springsteen. Thanks for listening, and I will see you guys next week for another incredible edition of the Juice Box. That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.